Talk about cotton as a commodity because Centre has halted duty on cotton imports till September end. Remember, this comes amid India's garment industry facing 50% tariff on US shipments and the current import duty is at 11%, which has been exempted for now. Let's take it across to my colleague Samir to get more details about this. Samir.
It started with a quiet announcement, one that most people would have missed if they weren't paying attention. Overnight, India, the world's second largest cotton producer, removed import duties on cotton coming from a country many don't even think about when they hear the word cotton, Burkina Faso. The news slipped under the radar for many, but for those in trade and geopolitics, alarm bells started ringing. Why would India, a nation that prides itself on its cotton self-sufficiency, suddenly open its doors to West African cotton duty-free? Was this about economics? Or was there something much bigger happening behind the scenes? To answer that, we need to peel back the layers of this move, from the farmers in dusty fields of Burkina Faso to the boardrooms of New Delhi, and even the high-level international negotiations where great powers play tug-of-war over Africa's resources. But before we get there, let's first understand what this sudden decision really means, and why it has the potential to reshape global cotton markets in ways no one saw coming. Because while this might look like a simple tariff cut, it's actually a signal of shifting alliances, deep pressures on India, and the rising weight of Africa in the New World Order. And as you'll see in a few minutes, this decision could set off a chain reaction with consequences far beyond just cotton. At first glance, India importing cotton isn't shocking. After all, India is the second largest consumer of cotton in the world, with its massive textile industry hungry for raw material. But the key here is that India has always prided itself on being largely self-reliant. For decades, India has positioned itself as both a grower and an exporter of cotton. Farmers across Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Telangana depend on cotton for their livelihoods. So when India announced that cotton imports from Burkina Faso would suddenly come in duty-free, people began asking what's going on. Was this a sign of weakness, an admission that India couldn't meet its own demand? Or was it something far more strategic? The textile industry insiders whispered one answer: pressure. Pressure from global supply chains, from rising costs, and from shifting geopolitical currents. But to understand why Burkina Faso of all countries is at the center of this, we need to look closer at West Africa and its role in the cotton trade. And that leads us into the heart of the story because Burkina Faso, though small, is not just another cotton producer. So, why Burkina Faso? And why now? The answer might surprise you. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa, might not look like an economic heavyweight on a map, but in the world of cotton, it's a giant. Cotton is Burkina Faso's white gold, the country's largest export and a backbone of its economy. For decades, West African nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, Benin, and Chad have been lobbying the world for fairer access to global markets. They've often accused Western nations of hypocrisy, preaching free trade while heavily subsidizing their own cotton farmers. Burkina Faso's cotton is prized for its quality, and unlike some heavily industrialized producers, it comes from smallholder farmers, giving it a reputation of being more authentic and less reliant on genetically modified crops, though that has been changing in recent years. India's removal of duties means Burkina Faso's cotton can flow more freely into Indian mills, where it will be spun into the fabrics that clothe not just Indians, but people all around the world. But this is not just about giving Burkina farmers a chance, it's about geopolitics, because in the background, China has been steadily strengthening its ties with Africa, offering infrastructure, loans, and market access. Could India's sudden decision be about keeping pace with China in Africa? Or was India pushed by something else, perhaps even by Western powers worried about African nations slipping into Beijing's orbit? This is where the story takes a new turn, because to see why India made this move, we have to go inside the textile mills of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, where demand is pushing the system to its limits. India's textile industry is massive. It employs millions of workers and feeds a global fashion machine that spans from Mumbai to Milan. But in recent years, Indian mills have faced a problem. Domestic cotton supply has struggled to keep up. Erratic weather, shifting crop patterns, and rising input costs have squeezed farmers. Yields have plateaued. On the other hand, demand has surged. International brands are increasingly sourcing from India as an alternative to China. The more orders that pour in, the more cotton India needs. But there's a catch: if domestic cotton becomes too expensive, India risks losing its competitive edge in the global market. Enter Burkina Faso. Cheap, high-quality cotton from West Africa is exactly what India's textile giants want. By removing duties, the government essentially made it easier for Indian mills to import what they need without raising costs. But here's the twist: while this helps the industry, it puts pressure on Indian farmers. Many worry that duty-free imports will undercut their prices. For a farmer struggling with debts, this isn't just an economic story, it's survival. So the question becomes, was India willing to anger its farmers just to please its textile magnates? Or was there another calculation at play? Because behind this decision lies another force, one that goes beyond economics, geopolitics. And that brings us to the bigger stage, where Africa, India, and global powers are playing a game that's only getting started. Let's zoom out. Africa has become one of the most contested battlegrounds for influence in the 21st century. China has invested billions in African infrastructure, securing trade deals and political alliances. Along the way, the Belt and Road Initiative runs deep into Africa, with roads, ports, and railways built using Chinese money. India, meanwhile, has been playing catch-up. New Delhi has tried to position itself as a partner, not a patron, offering development aid, training programs, and trade partnerships. But in terms of scale, China still dominates. So when India suddenly removes duties on cotton from Burkina Faso, it's not just about trade, it's about building goodwill. Burkina Faso is part of the Cotton for Initiative at the World Trade Organization, a bloc of African cotton producers lobbying for fairer global trade. By opening its doors to their cotton, India is signaling that it's willing to take Africa seriously as a partner. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Burkina Faso has also been strengthening its ties with new players, including Russia and BRICS nations. Could this duty-free deal be part of India's larger BRICS strategy? After all, if India wants Africa's support in building an alternative world order outside Western dominance, small moves like this go a long way. But the question remains, was this purely India's choice, or was it made under pressure? To answer that, we need to look at global cotton politics and how subsidies, tariffs, and trade wars shape what farmers thousands of miles apart plant each season. Cotton is not just a crop, it's a battlefield. For decades, African countries have complained that subsidies in the US, the EU, and even China distort global markets. These subsidies allow farmers in wealthy countries to sell cotton at artificially low prices, undercutting African producers who can't compete. At the World Trade Organization, Burkina Faso and its Cotton for Allies have demanded reform. They argue that without fair access, their economies will remain trapped in poverty. The problem is, reforms have been slow, and powerful nations rarely budge. India, however, has always walked a fine line. On one hand, it supports African nations rhetorically, championing the global South. On the other, it protects its own farmers. That's why this decision is so surprising. It's a real concession. But here's the hidden layer. By removing duties, India isn't just helping Burkina Faso, it's positioning itself as a leader of the developing world, someone willing to take bold steps where others won't. And yet, that leadership comes with risks. Indian farmers are already voicing concerns, and political opposition at home is starting to ask why African farmers are being prioritized over local ones, which raises the ultimate question. Is India making a bold bet that will pay off internationally, or is it setting itself up for domestic backlash that could spiral out of control? The answer lies in what happens next, because cotton may just be the beginning. Here's where it all comes together. Cotton on its own might look like just another commodity, but in reality, it's becoming a symbol of a larger shift. The world is moving from an era dominated by Western trade rules to one where emerging powers like India, China, and African nations are writing new ones. By removing duties on Burkina Faso's cotton, India is sending a message. It's ready to rethink trade, ready to embrace Africa, and ready to challenge the old order. This isn't just about fabric and clothing, it's about influence, alliances, and the fight for the future of the global South. If this works, India could strengthen its textile industry, win friends in Africa, and secure a more prominent role in shaping world trade. But if it backfires, the anger of Indian farmers could become a political storm, one that no government can ignore. And here's the kicker: cotton might just be the first domino, because if India is willing to make such a bold move on cotton, what's next? Oil? Gold? Uranium? That's the open question. And as the dust settles, the world will be watching to see if this is the start of a new chapter in India-Africa relations or the beginning of a gamble that spirals out of control. So what started as a quiet announcement has turned into a window into the future. A single decision on cotton imports reveals the pressures India faces. From its own industries, from global rivals like China, from African nations demanding fairness, and from the delicate balance between domestic politics and international ambition. Burkina Faso's cotton may be small in the grand scheme of global trade, but the symbolism is enormous. It shows how even the most ordinary of commodities can become a tool of strategy, diplomacy, and power. The real question is simple: will India's gamble pay off, or will it unravel under the weight of its contradictions? That only time will tell.